This is Thursday Thoughts for November the 13th, 2025, here on Following Him, the Disciple Life. Teaching the Jewish roots of Christianity may help stop the rise in anti-Semitism. Now, last part of that statement, I know there's a lot to discuss there. We're not really going to in this video. Suffice it to say, when you have public personas that have a large following, that these public personas are publicly praising Adolf Hitler, you've got a problem on your hands. There is a problem. There is a growing, increasing problem with hatred and bigotry towards Jews, towards the Jewish people. And a lot of this seems to be, from everything I can see, actually on the right. Now, there is much that has come out of the left that is very much against what is taught by the Christ, and with gender ideology and people that are against what they call traditional marriage, which I would submit is just biblical, what God wants marriage. We've seen stuff on the left that has been an issue in recent times, but this issue with anti-Semitism, while it can be seen on the left as well, does seem to be an increasing problem on the right-hand side of the political spectrum. When you look at a lot of the positions that are held by those on the right, much of it does go back to things that are taught by Christianity, as far as like their positions, taking a stand against abortion, the pro-life stance. Being those that would stand against transgenderism, against gender ideology, being defenders of quote unquote traditional marriage, which once again is just biblical marriage, it's just God ordained marriage. These things, that a lot of these things they do hold to, the good things that we see the right hold to, go back to Christianity, go back to what is taught by Christians. And you can look at history and actually see where Christianity has affected society, and things like the sanctity of life and such was greatly influenced by Christianity. And in recent times, on the right, much of it has been influenced by those that teach what Christ taught. Well, when it comes to anti-Semitism, I think we might say that we need to do a better job on teaching the Jewish roots of Christianity. Some people get confused when it comes to talking about the Old Covenant and New Covenant, and they almost act like Christians are supposed to be anti-Old Testament and that Jesus was somehow anti-Torah. Jesus was born under the law. According to Galatians 4:4, Jesus lived as a Jewish man. Jesus was a Jewish man. He was of the tribe of Judah, of the house of David. It doesn't get much more Jewish than that. All the first Christians were what? They were Jews. When they're going into the synagogues and showing that Jesus is the Christ, what are they using to do that? The scriptures they had at the time that we now know as the Old Testament. According to John 5:39, what does the Old Testament, now it doesn't use the phrase Old Testament because it wasn't the Old Testament yet. It was just the scriptures. The scriptures they had were, what we know as the 39 books of the Old Testament. But what did those things testify of? The Christ. The whole Testament is about the Christ. Their instructions for living and the prophecies given to them and all these things. This was all about the Christ and laying the foundations for the coming of the Christ. And so there are definitely Jewish roots to Christianity. Even the whole idea of being a disciple, a term that I do see more people using these days, and that is good because we're supposed to make disciples of all nations. But that concept, that is a Jewish concept. In the Jewish culture of the first century, you had these rabbis that would have their disciples. And so then you have this one particular rabbi, Jesus of Nazareth, that had his disciples. And before he goes back to heaven, he tells his disciples, hey, go make more of you of all nations. And so the church itself connects to a Jewish concept, because the church, in Acts 11:26, we have the word church and disciples and Christians. That those three terms, all used interchangeably. The church is a disciple group. That is a concept that has roots with the Jewish culture. So if the teachings about the sanctity of life and such have had an influence on the right, perhaps one of the things that can help fight against this rise in anti-Semitism is let's make sure we're teaching the Jewish roots of Christianity. This is not to say that we're still under the law of Moses or anything like that. No. We're saying roots. There's a cultural context to the New Testament, but that cultural context, it's Jewish. But we're not saying go back to the law of Moses, none of that. But we are saying that there is a foundation to be found in those things. And maybe if people understood that better, they would understand we're not anti-Old Testament, we're not anti-Jewish, but rather those things led to who we are. And now, of course, we need to, in turn, do what we can to help those among the Jews that don't yet understand that Jesus is the Christ, to help them understand that truth. You have a great rest of the day. Just consider what I've said here, and if I find it interesting what I'm getting ready to say, consider we were talking about anti-Semitism a little bit. Shalom.